Come on in, sit back and relax. You're listening to the Wealth Tech Today podcast. I'm your host, Craig Escowitz, founder of Ezra Group Consulting. And this podcast features interviews, news, and analysis on the trends and best practices all around wealth management technology. My guest for this episode was Aaron Brodt and David Hatfield, both from Amplify. We spoke about Amplify's platform and their market position. We dove a bit into their data-first architecture and their tech stack, talked about their multi-custodial integration, their AI-native data lake, and, of course, the future of AI in wealth tech. And speaking of the future of AI in wealth tech, if you're running a wealth management firm where the tech decisions used to fall to whoever drew the short straw, I want to tell you about a terrific offering from Ezra Group. We call it our fractional CTO service, or Fracto. Our Fracto service can support your current CTO on specific projects or help build a tech strategy if you don't have a CTO. We can also help if your ops team is drowning in manual workarounds or if you have new workflows you want to roll out and your advisors are still keeping notes in spreadsheets. That's where we come in. We can help manage your vendors, design the CRM workflows, and execute on those projects that have been sitting idly on the back burner for many years. So if you want to free your firm for exponential growth, you need to run, not walk to our website, EzraGroup.com, and click the golden Contact Us button on the homepage to schedule a free consultation about our Fracto service. We know what works and what doesn't. All right, now my standard housekeeping chores. Please subscribe to the show, yada, yada, yada. Check out our sponsor, the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation at investinothers.org. And if you're a software vendor in the wealth management space, please go to our vendor portal and register your product for our wealth tech integration score at ezragroup.com/register, so your score will always be up to date. Now, let's kick this thing off. All right, I'm excited to introduce our next guests. We have multiple guests here, and we introduce them one at a time. First is Aaron Brodt, CEO of Amplify. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Craig. How you doing, bud?
Fantastic. And David Hatfield, CTO, also of Amplify.
Hey, Craig. Thanks for having us.
Man, it's great. Guys, great to be here. I'm glad you could make it. Where are you both, Aaron? Where are you calling from?
I'm coming from Scottsdale, Arizona.
Nice. And David?
Same. Right down the hall.
I see the background. It's hard to tell with these backgrounds. You could be in the same place, or you could just be using the same virtual background.
And it's 80 out, so just to let you know, the weather's nice today.
I was in Phoenix 2 weeks ago for a conference, and now I'm back in New Jersey where it's 12 degrees. But I'm not complaining. Everything's all good. We're all happy to be wherever we are, and we're happy to be able to do this podcast with you guys. And I'm really excited for you to be here and talk about your technology and trends in the industry. So let's jump in. And for listeners who don't know Amplify yet, can you please give the 30-second elevator pitch for the platform?
Sure. David, is it okay if I take this one?
Yeah, go for it.
Right. So I think the best way to describe Amplify is that technology layer that sits between the custody and clearing in the wealth management firm. You have custody where your assets live. And then, you have the RIA, the day-to-day, right, of the execution. So the onboarding, service, trading, reporting, compliance, client experience. And so that is the wrapper that Amplify lives on. We're a modern operating system that gives all those tools to the wealth management firm. But then we also connect with their third-party systems as they need. I think the other part is that with that tech, we're a high service firm. So we connect high touch service with high touch tech, where we really want to focus on the overall experience for the RIA. And, I think Amplify is built for those RIAs, the broker dealers, the financial service firms that are really looking to scale their AUM without really adding a lot of headcount.
Excellent. I think everyone wants to do that, right? That's the definition of scale. You're adding, you're growing without adding headcount, right? So that's how scale is defined. So you define your platform as a modern alternative to legacy TAMPs and legacy all-in-one. So that's a great position. You're new. There's a lot of vendors out there doing what you do. As you mentioned, legacy platforms. Everyone's got something. This is not you're not going to find an RIA or broker dealer that doesn't have a platform. So we used to call it an unplug business. You got to unplug someone else to plug you in. So what architectural decisions did you make when you're building this platform that legacy platforms cannot retrofit?
Yeah, that's a good question. What was important when we first started building this was we didn't just start building tools. We started looking at what are the advisor workflows day to day, and what's the data that really underpins them, and how they're going to be successful. The tools then kind of fall into place on top of that. So we add trading, right? We add account opening. We add all the performance management piece on top of that. So that just became a natural extension of the data layer that we wanted to make sure that we controlled. And then, like Aaron mentioned, we have a service overlay piece, which is where we start getting into, some of the do it for you, the TAMP pieces, the outsourced things. So because we have the strong data layer from the beginning, all those pieces just kind of sit on top. And then the firm can choose to flex one way or the other if they want to do it themselves, if they want more, hands-on from us. It can go either way. So we're positioned really well, where other firms might be aggregating a bunch of different tools together. They don't all talk to each other. They're based off of different data sets, data domains. And so bolting them on just doesn't work as well when you think about data from the outset.
You mentioned strong data layer. That piques my interest. So we're all about that here at Ezra Group. We do a lot of work on data, and we find a lot of clients don't have their data in order. And it's often, as you mentioned, spread out amongst different silos. So can you go down one more level, David, being the CTO? There's a lot of CTOs listening to this podcast. Talk about your data layer. If you just can share some of the technology you used to build it and some of the decisions you made on your architecture.
Yeah. It really comes down to a discipline and just understanding how you want to govern that data. Do you want to have multiple definitions of an account? I think that's probably a no, right? So we decide on what a definition of account is, where that account lives, who is allowed to touch it, who's allowed to modify it, who is allowed to read from it. And then that kind of extends out from there. So if you have the proper data architecture, and you have that discipline, every time you want to add something to it, you think about how the different pieces are going to talk to it, receive from it. It's really just putting the discipline in front of it whenever you try to make those decisions, so you don't mess up that core data element.
Excellent. Well, can you share some of the technology you've used? Who's your cloud providers? What kind of data stores or database technology are you using? What decisions did you make? Did you pick, and why?
Oh, absolutely. We gravitated toward the Azure environment. It was an environment that fit what we needed to do. They have a built-in Azure SQL server that is the core backbone for much of what we do. Right? We have distributed services across what we're doing, but the relational database spoke really well to what we're trying to build here. So that is the core data layer. We have cloud storage pieces for some of the unstructured data, like you're used to, your storage through blobs and things like that. We have some exposure to other NoSQL setups for the eventual consistency layer. But for our core data that matters to the business, it's in that Azure SQL layer.
Very cool. So one of the things you talk about on your website and in some of your marketing is you want to unify onboarding, trading, advisor dashboards, enterprise intelligence. That's a lot of the moving parts, and it's difficult to keep all those modules integrated. So how do you do that? What are some of the best practices you've implemented, and what are some of the hurdles you've gotten over to build a truly integrated tech stack rather than a bunch of loosely connected tools?
Yeah, I really like that question, because it all speaks to the same thing, right? If you can depend on your core data being solid, then the integration amongst itself and even out from outside systems gets really easy. So as long as you're able to abstract that out and you have layers in terms of how you access it. So we have what we call APIzing the data. So we have an API that's used internally that then is exposed to the tool set. The data store can maintain itself. The API is that access layer. And so I think where a lot of times development might go, call it wrong, is they embrace the microservice architecture because you can have rapid construction. But when they're doing that, they don't necessarily think about the implications of isolating each of those domains pieces of data, and they never talk to each other. They never think about it in a holistic standpoint. So again, we started from there. And while we do have a microservice component, right, a lot of it, again, the discipline speaks to how we make sure that even though they might be in disparate storage locations, they're all governed by a common data architecture.
Were there any specific decisions you made when you were building that data architecture that you might have changed if you were building it now?
I don't think so. I had the benefit of really understanding the wealth management industry coming into this. So the entities, the way that they interact with each other, the cardinality to, their downstream elements, I had a pretty good understanding of. And we were working hand in hand with advisors that interacted with these types of data as we were building it. And so that gave us that insight that our data model was really strong from the get-go. And for the most part, we haven't had to break it apart and redo really any piece of it since we started. We iterate and maybe we kind of go back and rethink some things as we're building it. But once it got set, we've been lucky, I suppose, that we've thought about it and battle tested it before we said, all right, the application's ready to build on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what David said there is the ability for David to understand the entire kind of wealth management ecosystem. And when we started to whiteboard out the entire experience, and we really looked at personas, right? We looked at the advisor and what does the advisor do on a daily basis, their CSA and the C-suite. And so David's knowledge of the industry, I think, really gave us a leg up on the initial infrastructure build that David and his team put together.
I understand. I'm always looking to try to poke holes in people's technology if I can, but haven't done it yet. We'll see if we can do it. All right. So you guys, there's many platforms in our space. Everyone's got to be multi-custodial. That's one of the benefits of not using the custodian's platform. If I was on Fidelity, I would just use Fidelity's platform. Why do I need you guys? But if I'm multi-custodial, got to go with one of the third-party vendors. So everyone claims to be multi-custodial, but in practice, there's a lot of uneven depth and uneven connectivity across those different custodians. So where does your integration shine compared to some of the legacy platforms you're competing with?
Yeah. Multi-custodian is a strategy that I think most RIAs should try to achieve, right? Because you abstract away from having a single point of failure at the custodian layer. So naturally that falls onto us to handle. The simple answer is it really depends on what is the digital maturity of your counterparty. And so what we've done is kind of two things. We started with, for every area that it matters, whether you're thinking about account opening, trading, performance management integration, those types of things, we said, okay, what's the common core set of interface, technology, functionality we want to make sure that we offered? And so we defined that up front, and that was sort of our abstract layer that everything had to pass through. And then we start plugging in each of the custodians and programming out their nuances. Trading is one of those that's pretty well defined, right? Through fixed protocol, everybody's operating on pretty much the same language, and then each custodian has their own little nuances. And so inside of that abstraction layer of trading, everybody has the same interface, but we may turn certain options on or off depending on what the custodian might support, right? Some support, individual lot selection, some don't through fix. And so that's something that we're just able to turn on or off. And if there's a path that has to go down where there's more of a kind of carry at the last mile, that is either done by us or done by the firm, we can make those options available. I think it becomes more obvious in account opening, right? There are custodians that are really fashion forward. They have APIs for literally everything. We integrate great with those because we speak the same language. Other ones, they want to do a DocuSign paper-based delivery. Those work well, but naturally there's limitations in getting the feedback from them and where everything goes. And then there's other custodians that it's you got to sign the paperwork and then hand deliver it. So then it's really making decisions on how far does Amplify take it, and then when it needs to get to that final mile, who carries it, that last piece? Is it us? Do we hand it? Do we let the firm take care of that? That's where the service piece starts to come in.
We call that the problem of the last mile.
Yep.
I like to talk. I'd like to throw out my own credentials every now and then. So you mentioned Fix, and I hesitate to say this because it just tells me how old I am. But I was on one of the Fix committees when they were developing it in the '90s. I think I was on
Very cool.
the security committee or the cybersecurity committee or something. But
Really?
yeah, it was a long time ago. But yeah, I
Very
would
cool.
just like to throw that out there. But it just shows how old the industry is, right? That we've been doing this for 30 years. But stuff still works, right? It's nothing. Fix is a good protocol, even though it's 30 years old.
It's made well from the outset.
And it certainly has.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to roll back a little bit to you mentioned microservices, and when microservices are great, but there can be some kind of chaos if it's not developed properly. So, how do you prevent service teams from leaking business logic into their own schemas or creating shadow definitions of core entities like accounts or households? That that could be technical or cultural or both.
Sure. Again, I used discipline to describe that earlier, and discipline and governance, I think, is what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever we approach a development project, microservices enter the equation simply as a mechanism to get there. We don't just jump right there and start building, right? So everything follows our SDLC. It has a design that goes into the overall architecture. So whether we happen to build it in a monolith, which is not ideal for rapid development, or we build it in a microservice, whatever the final architecture looks like, the inception of that particular feature and how we build it, how we make decisions around it is going to be the same. The fact that it ends up in a small code repository that the API does 4 or 5 things because it's easiest to fast build CI/CD it up to Azure. It's just a mechanism for the developer to get their job done quicker. But the decision of doing it, the feature itself, it falls under a global governance and decision-making process.
Very cool. But back to custodians. So you talked about your API layer, which we like. We like to see that. And I'm assuming you're using your own APIs to communicate internally, right? So it's eating your own dog food, right? So you're not just using it externally. But how do you isolate failures when an external custodian's API degrades or changes behavior?
Oh, we're getting real technical. I like that.
This is a Wealth Tech Today podcast, my friend. We have to get technical here.
I like that. Cool. There's a few different ways that you can approach that. When it's a real-time connection, let's say that somebody's operating in Amplify, they push a button and it goes real-time. Obviously, that's the easiest, right? If there's a failure that happens, as it makes it several hops, it can bubble back up and you have immediate response back on what might need to happen, whether it goes directly to the user. Hey, you entered a bad field. They can correct it and, send it back again. Whether it goes to route to some ticket, that's, up to whatever the decision point is. When it's more of a back-end batch processing, obviously that needs to go into queuing. We have a few different ways of handling that. If it's a, general failure, and it appears to be, call it a network issue, right? Then we have back off retries, things like that are, pretty par for the course. For the ones that, were successful in terms of the communication was successful, but it failed because of some business validation rules, those go into a queue to get remediated. Again, either popping up for the end user to go fix and then, kind of resubmit, or, again, populates back into our central control of, hey, raise this ticket for somebody to go look at on the back end, production support, and handle it. So it's really kind of what the error is that it found. And, if it's something that the user can and should detect, we try to get it back to them to make that correction.
All right, David, you passed the test. that question was not on the list of questions we sent you. So I wanted to try to throw you a curveball and see if I can trip you up, but I couldn't do it. All right. Well, I'm going to keep trying. Okay. So you have a platform. It's a full feature platform, includes trading and rebalancing, and your stack seems to emphasize centralized controls, and you claim you have decentralized execution. So that can be complicated, and we've done this with other firms, with other of our broker dealer and RIA clients. It's a difficult point to balance advisor flexibility with enterprise level risk governance. So how do you do that without slowing your clients' operating processes down?
So it It starts with understanding what the workflow is that the advisor or the firm wants to allow the advisor to follow. If there is somebody who wants to be full-on trader, portfolio manager, and the firm says yes, they're allowed to do that, then they essentially have, outside of the really bad risk ones, they can kind of do whatever they want, right? Maybe they can't overbuy accounts. That's probably not a good idea. But outside of that, they're allowed to form their trades, build them, send them, and handle the allocations. And so they have a full trading interface. For other advisors, and this is where it gets into something that's a little bit more unique to the way that we built it from day one. Maybe the firm wants to give the advisor the feeling of entering a trade, but they don't want to let them execute it. And this is common in terms of trying to make the process more efficient. So outside of that, what I just described, they would have to write a ticket to some trader to execute on their behalf. Not efficient. But if the advisor can go in and start the trade, get it to a blotter, send it, get it into an approval workflow, and then a compliance person, a trader, whoever that is that has oversight can say, yeah, this looks okay. They can complete the process on behalf of that advisor. So the advisor feels like they have more control, a little more agency in the overall trading process, but they're not the ones actually executing. It's up to a certain point, and then somebody finishes it along the way. And so that's one way that we handle that. We have, your standard rules engine that, you'd look for. Maybe a firm doesn't want to allow, any trading on these types of securities. They could say immediate reject or immediate send for approval. So, but allow them to trade, standard equities. So those types of rules allow the firm to really set how much do they want to, oversee and monitor and stop things from happening, but also then let things go that really just need to be straight through processing.
You answered my next question. So I was going to ask about your rules engine and what can I block? Can I build programs that block certain security types? Like these, in this program, you can't buy commodities, you can't buy currency, futures and forwards and options and things like that. And you can't have more than 10% in any one name and such like that. So I can build all those kind of programs and push them out to my clients so that they can run multiple programs and, and it knows which one is which.
Yes, absolutely. So it's fairly flexible, and we're adding more capabilities every day. But absolutely, that the rules engine is there for that purpose, so that the firm can, have that control and let the computers really do what they do best and detect and stop or pause, for further validation.
And when you said advisor, understand the advisor workflow. What we call those, you mentioned the advisors can trade, and they can really have full control. We call that rep as PM, right? That's the full rep as PM abilities where the advisor can do everything versus where they can pick, mutual funds and stocks, but they can't actually trade them. It might be more of a rep as advisor or other guardrails around the advisor's capabilities.
Correct. Or even, choosing a third-party money manager that's managed alongside APM. Maybe they want to have 3-4 funds plus 3-4 outsourced money managers that can all be in the same, UMA account. So all of those have that layer of rules where the advisor, again, could be just saying, this is what I want it to look like. And if they want to start from, say, a model of, 20% this, 20% that, enter the rebalancer, this looks good, go ahead and send. Again, they have all those tools to get it up to a certain point. And if they, again, want to allow execution, then they can. Otherwise, it can go to another team to finish that process.
Well, I think too, David, is the way that you built the, trading engine to, give one doorway to the advisor. And that advisor now can trade directly like he's trading at the custodian. He can bring in models that are at the firm level. He can bring in his own models. He could bring in third-party money managers. You can put, set limit orders. And so, giving the, user the ability to trade at will, how they want to, or the ability that the firm is allowing them, I think has really been a huge value add for us, as you're not going to different doorways depending on how you want to trade.
I like that. That's important to have that flexibility. All right. So I'm going to ask you some maybe some tough questions here, but before I do that, the reason why I had you have you on the program is we like your platform. We've seen it at seen, conferences and talked to some clients who are using it. And I think we like more competitions. We always want more choices for advisors. There's never enough, right? Even though there's already 20 or 30 what we might call advisor operating systems, portfolio management, end-to-end platforms. There's always room for another one. And as you mentioned, you're building new technology, which gives you an advantage over legacy. But that being said, there's on your website you describe Amplify as being built on an AI native data lake. So I don't know what that means. I don't think there is such a thing as an AI native data lake. You can build AI around a data lake, and you can maybe you can plug in AI around that. But what does that actually mean in concrete technical terms? That's not just marketing language.
Sure. Understand. Okay. So I think to back up a little bit, right, we talked a lot about our discipline around data. And as you're probably aware, right, the data is the most important part of the data lake. If you have messy data going in, you're not going to really get much out of the data lake. The core architecture of that data going into our data lake inherently has an organization already set for it. And so when you get to the data lake, which is a technology, as you rightly kind of put forth, it's a technology that naturally has all of those pipes for AI workflows. So the fact that we've taken the data that's ready for full consumption by that data lake into the technology, the data lake layer, which has the AI workflows that can sit on top of it, that's where the AI native piece comes from it. As opposed to a lot of people say, all right, a data lake can consume a bunch of disparate sources. It can, right? It's kind of the same thing as the microservice comments. You can throw a bunch of data at the data lake, but if you have 5 different, call it ingested tables for an account, okay, what do you make of that mess? Is it really ready to be used in an AI context? I would argue not, right? And you're probably familiar with the Medallion architecture, right? That dumping ground on bronze is what it's meant for, but that bronze is already in a really good state for us. So when we go to silver, when we go to gold, and have that AI ready product, it's much easier and faster for us to get there. And so that's where it funnels into, and then our ability to put AI on top of it becomes, again, that much easier because of the native thinking in the way that it has been constructed.
Indeed. Okay, I get it. But so can you talk a little bit about for example, in your AI native data lake, is it because you optimized your data architecture for AI workflows, or is there something else in there that you're doing?
That's a large portion of it. Yes, it's where we have gotten it to where some of our data comes in fully third normal form, which then can translate into whatever format expansion that's needed. Some of it is already somewhat denormalized, so we have each of those reporting layers that's ready for the analytics part of the system, kind of going in day one. There's a few things that data lake excels at in terms of like histories and deltas and things like that the technology adds because it just inherently does it. And so that's where we can take advantage of, all right, we're coming out of our OLTP, going into our call it the OLAP, right, layer. And the process of doing that, the data lake just kind of sits on in a very natural way.
Excellent. We're running out of time, as we always do. And I want to get one more question or two if I can. Let me jump towards the end. Let me give something to Aaron. He's been sitting very patiently while David's been answering all the questions. So Aaron, looking ahead a couple of years, how do you see your platform, and which areas of your platform do you think is most likely to be disrupted by AI, including by somebody else, if you're not careful?
Oof, that's a good question. I think the disruption area is anything that is task orientated. So giving the advisor, the CSA, the compliance team, the operational department, all of those structures and giving them insights into actionable items. I think, we've seen a lot of conversations going around is, the old CRM system, is that, out of style now with AI? Do you really need a CRM system? And so I think the biggest thing that, I'm pushing David and David's team to look at is how do we continue to make sure that we're on the forefront of what could come tomorrow, from an overall data utilization standpoint. And I think, the business today, from a fiduciary standpoint of allowing that human being, that advisor, to make the end call, I don't think is going away anytime soon. We saw the robo advisors and where that's gone, but giving all the insights and all those actionable items as quick as humanly possible, from an AI standpoint, for that advisor to make better decisions. I think that's the big concern with me is, that's the disruptor that, we need to plan for.
Guys, I really appreciate your honesty and your openness and your ability, your desire to get the word out about your platform. You answered every question I gave you, and now we're out of time. Thanks for being here. Where can people find more information about Amplify?
David?
Amplifyplatform.com.
And it's Amplify with a Y, Amplify platform.com.
Yes.
Guys, thanks for being on the program. Great talking
Thank you.
Thank
Really
you for having us.
appreciate it.
Hey, it's Craig again. Here are my top 3 takeaways from this episode. All right. Amplify has built a modern, integrated platform with a strong data architecture at the core. David explained how they designed the data model and APIs up front to enable seamless integration across the different modules like trading, rebalancing, performance, etc. This gives them an advantage over legacy platforms that have bolted on different tools. 2, Amplify provides flexible controls and workflows to balance advisor autonomy with enterprise-level risk governance. Advisors can have varying degrees of control, from full trading capabilities to just order entry with approval workflows. This allows firms to configure the right guardrails. And 3, Amplify is focused on using AI and data analytics to provide advisors with actionable insights and intelligence to improve decision-making. Aaron highlighted this as a key area of focus to stay ahead of potential disruption from AI-powered tools that could automate certain advisor tasks. And congratulations, you've reached the end of another episode of the Wealth Tech Today podcast. But before you go, please head over to our website, EzraGroup.com, and scroll to the bottom of the homepage and sign up for our newsletter. Once a month, you receive an email chock full of wealth management goodness, news, information, and updates. You will not be disappointed. Thanks again for listening, and talk to you all again next time.